Galatians chapter 4 verses 4 through 7. In the fullness of time, God sent his Son, born of a woman. Brothers and sisters, when the fullness of time had come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to ransom those under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. As proof that you are sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying out, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave but a son, and if a son then also an heir, through God. Verse 4, But when the fullness of time had come. As you know, God is in control of human history, and this verse shows that control came into the world at the exact time of the Father's choosing. Timing of events are very important in human history. If you didn't work at a particular company, would you have met your spouse? If you weren't laid off from a particular job, would you have found one that paid more? If mom and dad hadn't brought you to church on a regular basis, would you have found out about God or know how important God was to your parents? Jesus arrived at a time which was biblically predicted. Many believe God to be a tyrant, do as I say or I'll make you pay, when in fact he is better viewed as a loving Father. Today's reading is another biblical confirmation of the Trinity. The word Trinity isn't used in the Bible, but the concept of the Trinity does appear over and over again. Another important point is the Father sent his Son. You can't send someone who doesn't already exist. As the Gospel of John points out, 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. 2. He was in the beginning with God. 3. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made. Christ, who was fully divine, eternal, and equal in being with the Father, came from heaven to earth and entered human history as a man. The phrase, born of a woman, fulfills Isaiah chapter 7 verse 14, Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a young woman shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. And what does Emmanuel mean? God is with us. Born under the law, whose law? The law of Moses, the law under which his earthly parents lived. To redeem those who were under the law, those who had already been born and those yet to be born. In the Old Testament we see that redemption has a legal meaning wherein an animal sacrifice substitutes for, or redeems or saves a person from bondage. Redemption had a special significance for the firstborn. The firstborn male, both man and beast, belonged to God under the law and needed to be redeemed with an offering to God. In compliance with the law of Moses, Mary and Joseph offered a pair of turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons, as a redemption for Jesus, their firstborn son. Redemption also implies a family obligation. An Israelite who sold himself into slavery to pay his debts could be redeemed by a family member. The redemption fee was the price paid for freedom. Humanity sells themselves into the bondage of slavery, and are in need of redemption, with every sin they commit. In the Jewish tradition, this substitutional redemption is made on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, when the sins of the people are symbolically placed on the head of the scapegoat, who is then driven out of the community just as Jesus was led out of Jerusalem to his place of execution. Again Paul raises the issue of sonship and adoption. 7. So through God you are no longer a slave but a son, and if a son then an heir. Under Roman law, an adopted child, even if he was formerly a slave, had full membership in the family. They had the same rights, privileges, and responsibilities as their adoptive father's biological children. Paul sums up this adoptive relationship in Romans 8:12-17. So then, brethren, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. If according to the flesh you will die, but if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body you will live. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received the spirit of sonship. When we cry, Abba, Father, Father, it is the Spirit himself bearing witness with our spirit that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him. In short, if you live by God's rules or values, then as a child of God you will inherit with the Father in heaven.